This week we have a very special guest. You know her from Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, the internet at large, and the Homemade Camera Podcast Zine #1. We have Nicole Small from Montreal. Nicole, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Thanks for coming on. So in this first segment, we just kind of wanted to get to know you and get our listeners to get to know you. Who are you? Where are you from?
I'm from Montreal, Canada. I started my journey in photography about 2005. And it actually started out from me wanting to shoot my own clothing because I used to design. And I had a small woman's line, a sportswear line. And that's kind of how I really wanted to learn photography. But it shifted quite quickly once I started shooting people with it. And it just turned into portraiture, and portraiture became what I really, really loved to do. And throughout that time, I assisted quite a bit of photographers. And then once I knew and started to understand what I was doing and how I could actually create moods and stories, I then just branched out on my own. And the journey has led me here where I am now, 2020. Never thought I'd actually be a self-portrait artist, but it just happened to turn out that way. And I'm pretty happy where I am right now.
I'm curious about this clothing line. I also had an internet clothing line very briefly, just trying to sell anything on the internet. I did not know anything about it. I was not like a designer. I was just buying and selling junk from the internet, and I was horrible at it. I assume that if you were doing it with any of the passion that you go about doing photography with, you were actually making clothes. What types of things did you make?
It was less women's sportswear. I was very much into the athletics, so I wanted to start creating clothes that I would like to wear, and it just morphed into starting, to make stuff for myself. And then, of course, people would be like, "Hey, where'd you get that?" Or, "Where'd you buy that?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I made it." And they'd be like, "Yeah, whatever." I'm like, "Yeah, I made it." And then it just kind of, grew from there. Started off with friends and then friends of friends. And I mean, it didn't really go that wide, but it went wide enough, I guess, for me to kind of start to think about how I could actually market it. And then photography fell into my lap. And that's how it started. That's how it started for me.
Do you have a background in design education? Did you go to college or in high school take design classes?
No, I didn't. My grandmother used to sew, so I learned a little bit of tricks from her. And it was a lot of trial and errors, reading books, YouTube. I just, I'm a very determined person. When I want to learn something, I'll just do it, keep doing it until I get it right. So I didn't go to any kind of design school or any lessons, nothing. I just learned on my own. And, just when you keep doing it, you get better and better. And it just started that way.
Okay.
It's a very familiar feeling to me. I often tell people that I went to YouTube University. So, Nicole, you were actually not only designing but manufacturing clothes as well.
Yeah, I was doing the samples, I was doing the patterns, I was doing the cutting, I was doing everything. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. But and it just kind of left me when I picked up that camera and started shooting. I switched. It was almost instantaneous. I just switched and discovered, oh my God, I can actually get a mood and a feeling by shooting a photograph. And then I just kind of switched over to wanting to learn about photography. So a photographer who I met during this time, I had asked him if he could teach me. His name is Mark Boucier, and we're friends till this day. And he said, "Okay, well, I have a photo shoot coming up. You're welcome to come along." And so I went along and I just watched what he did. And the next thing I worked very hard to get my first camera. My first camera was the Nikon D70s. And that was it, you know. And it was another trial because then it was this Photoshop thing, which I didn't know existed. And I didn't know that you had to put your pictures in this software to fix it up, which I needed real badly because it was running and exposure and all that stuff. What was it? I just wanted to get this picture, and it was just not coming out right. And so he taught me a little bit about Photoshop, and I actually started off with Paint Shop Pro. That's because I couldn't afford Photoshop, and
Sure.
so I started with that, and eventually I bought the CS2. And then, you know, from there, I just kind of, I learned Photoshop again through YouTube, through videos, webinars. I mean, a lot of photographers have on their blogs, they would have like tutorials. And that's how I taught myself. And just day in and day out, I would just keep at it until I got comfortable with the tools. And then I was able to use it on my own without looking at anything. And that's, again, how it started there for me. But I really don't like Photoshop too much. It takes too much of your free time. I'm very anal and very meticulous. So when I'm in Photoshop, I could, you know, especially when I was shooting in the beginning, I had a lot of fixes to do. So it took me so long to manage to get a nice and decent photo. So over time, I became really bored. I'm like, this can't be the process of photography. It's just, okay, I shoot pictures, then I have to choose the right one. And at that time, I was shooting 1,000 photos because I was never sure if this one would be the good one or if that one would be a good one. It was just too much. You know, I spent weekends, you know, just in front of a computer trying to figure it out. And I just didn't like that. So over time, I started to look to see if I can assist other photographers that were doing something a little bit more interesting. And I so happened to meet a photographer who who introduced me to film. And this was in 2010 or 2011. I remember going to one of the sessions, and he had this big clunk of a camera in his hand, and I was like, what the hell is that? At the time, I didn't know, but it was an RZ67. And
a reasonably sized camera.
Yeah, you know, and then I was like, what's that? He said, oh, it's a film camera. Then he took out a roll of Ilford FP4. He's put it in the camera. He said, this is how you load it. And he's doing it. And I'm like, what the hell? You know, I'm like, this still exists? I didn't know this was still in existence. And right away, I was like, well, how do I get one of these things? You know, and he's like, well, you know, maybe you should start with a 35 millimeter. I'm like, what's that? So I did my own research and eventually went on a classified site, which he had suggested I do. And I mean, people were selling the cameras for like cheap, $60, $80, you know. And so I bought a Minolta XD, all black. It came with 2 lenses for about $90. And that's when I started. And the minute I started, I just never put down a film camera since that day. And that was it. That was it for me. I just made a total switch. I mean, during the time, I would still use my digital camera for clients and stuff, but film just became the thing that I loved. And it was even more so when I discovered that you could actually process your own film, because it became very expensive. I would shoot rolls and rolls and rolls and then bring it to the lab, and then it would be like, oh my God, how much I had got to pay. And then I figured there's got to be another way. This is just too much. And then again, I started to, you know, I always like to look on YouTube or Flickr or one of those websites. And then I found this guy doing it in his bathroom, and then another guy doing it in his kitchen. And I was like, are you kidding me? You can do this? And then that was another thing for me. Then I realized, okay, I'm going to learn this and I'm going to do it. And that's what I did. I just started to shoot my rolls of film and process them. And that's, again, how I started to become even more intrigued in this whole film thing. And then printing came into that, and buying an enlarger, then buying cameras, which was something that I got to control myself on because I can get very carried away with that.
Yeah, it's no longer cheaper than bringing your rolls to the lab, huh?
Oh my God. Yeah, it was crazy. It was like $100 or something the first time I went to bring my rolls, and I was like, this is crazy, you know? And so I found a way to make it work for myself, and I discovered all these ways that I can do it by myself, and that's how it started from there. My very, very first camera that I did buy was the Mamiya C330, to tell you the truth. And there was nobody. I just bought it. There was a local guy here who used to have his own little shop where it was just film cameras and all this different stuff in there. And I just was kind of attracted to the Mamiya C330, and that's what I bought. My second camera, into film photography, but it was my first into 120. And again, I was blown away, and I kind of preferred more of the 120 than the 35, just because that frame is so much more bigger, when you're scanning or when you're printing. And then it just morphed. I bought plastic cameras. Everything just started to come into my hands. At one point, I even bought a Zenit camera. Then I ended up selling that. I bought it back again and selling it again. It was a back and forth kind of thing. It was just so exciting. There was all these different things. I just couldn't believe this was still here. So anything that I could try, I wanted to give it a try at least once. And it's still my drive now. If I could at least do something once, I'd like to at least do it one time, whether it's a success or whether it's a failure. And it just keeps going and going and going. So I even have a Hasselblad, to tell you the truth, which was bought after the Mamiya C330, but I didn't like the feel of the camera in my hands. And a lot of people probably would say I'm weird to say that, but
for sure, I would say that.
I don't know why.
I feel exactly the same way.
Really?
Yeah, I don't care for those.
It just didn't feel right in my hands. Mm-hmm. And I used it, and I said, okay, maybe it's just going to take time. I just do not like the feel in my hands. And it's in my closet collecting dust. Are
you still using the C330 then?
I had put it away for quite a while because I had then bought a Yashica D, which is the camera that goes with me everywhere. And the reason why I kind of put the Mamiya C330, it's heavy. It's a heavy build. And walking around with my heavy tripod, it became a little bit of a nuisance. I mean, I trek a lot, so I go up mountains, up hills and everything, and I found it very, very heavy. So at one point, I was like, I wonder if they have cameras like this, but smaller. And it just so happened that I just came into using the Yashica D. Again, I bought it for like $80 off of a classified site. And it's just my go-to camera. It's my go-to camera.
That's a steal.
I'm telling you. I'm telling you. But at the time, I remember when I bought it, he was like, I don't even think these things, work. And I don't even think you can even get the film for it anymore. And I'm like, yeah, maybe not. I was just playing stupid. I didn't want him to pay the price or anything, So I bought that, and then that just became my camera that everywhere I go, that camera is with me. It's so lightweight. It's just the best thing to just take with me anywhere,
Yeah, I feel the same way. Those are really effective cameras for the weight. And I know a guy from the Northwest. I'm old enough so that I grew up with film, but he photographed all the mountains around here for guidebooks. So pretty extreme mountain climbing in the Cascade Range. And he took a Rolleiflex everywhere and did all his photography with that. And this was, steep climbing and really difficult terrain, and that just was the perfect camera for that, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I started actually using it with a light stand instead of my heavy tripod. It's just that small, and that I was able to just put it on a light stand and use it. So, yeah.
And I had a Mamiya C220 for a while, and while it took nice pictures, I probably put my finger through the bellows 2 or 3 times, and I can't have bellows cameras go around with me. That's not a thing. That's why I can't have nice things.
I started going back to using it though. See, the one thing about the Yashica D, you can't get very close. I think your minimum distance is about 3 feet or so. And I mean, if you know my style, I like to get real tight to my subjects. So then I started to look back at the C330, and then I started to say, I think I'm gonna start trekking with this, because I'm gonna have to get used to it, and because the visions and the ideas I have in my head, it would be better for me than the Yashica D. So I've kind of gotten back into using the Mamiya C330. But the Yashica D is still my ultimate #1 favorite.
So what led you from... Oh, go ahead.
Same question I was going to ask. And so when did all this degenerate into making your own cameras?
Okay. Originally, when I started pinhole photography, I didn't like it. I bought a Diana camera and I didn't like it. I brought it back, I think, 2 days later. And then for some odd reason, just started looking into it again, and maybe a year later or something like that. Again, just trying to find something different, a little different than what I was, doing and learning. And then I bought a box camera, just a plain box camera off of B&H, and 4x5. And I started working with that. And as I started to go along with working with that camera, I wanted it bigger. I started looking into different options, and I said, I think I'm just going to make a 5x7, and I made the 5x7, and that's...
Yeah, but why stop there?
I made the 5x7, so I made a wide angle, and then I made a more telephoto 5x7. It just, I think once you start, it's like a drug, because then you start to think, well, I built this, but what else can I do? That, or what else can I built an 8x10 that also works like a pinhole. Again, making one versus trying to buy one, there's a big difference in price, right?
Yeah, it costs way more to design a camera than to just go out and buy one. But I can't help myself.
Even now, I still have ideas of what I want to build. It just doesn't stop. Just the options and just the way that the camera works itself, it's limitless. And whatever idea that comes in my head, if it's about building a camera, I'll build one, and that's it.
Yeah, that's the same thing that drives me, and collecting them too. Even though I grew up in the 70s with all sorts of film cameras in every direction, I couldn't afford any of them. I used the same exact camera for 25 years because in those days you bought one camera and that was it. Like you were out of funds, and you had a camera, so why would you need two? But what I'm doing now is reliving like this amazing fantasy existence as if I was a millionaire, because there are so many old cameras around. And as you say, you can make the ones you can't afford, and that's really what I'm too. But then once you get into it, of course, then it's a thing of its own.
Yeah.
And new ways to take a picture.
So I'd like to take it back. We're going to go way down the camera rabbit hole, but as I've been derailing this podcast for a while, Nicole, what other things do you like to build? I know that you made clothing, but I assume that you are the type of autodidact that likes to build a lot of things. Have you always been a tinkerer? Have you always made things?
No. My father was a handyman, and maybe that could be part of it. I used to always be around when he would build stuff and everything, but it never really I never really started using that until I met up with photography. I don't think so. It's kind of hard to say.
Yeah,
Um,
although I think making clothing is one of the more challenging crafts, and except for learning new tools, if you can make clothing, you can make just about anything.
yeah.
Hey, have you ever tried to build your own camera bag? That was one of my only sewing projects of all time.
No, that's a good idea. But no, I haven't. That's a
It
good
was
idea.
not a good idea for me. I spent about $200 on materials and a week worth of time. I made this camera bag. I still have it, but then I realized for $75 I could buy like a $10 bag that was way better than the one that I wanted.
Oh, that's a good idea. I never thought of that actually.
Oh yeah.
I think there's something to be said for using fabric to build really big cameras that fold down really small. That's
Yeah.
something I've been thinking about.
Not a camera bag, but a bag camera.
Right.
Okay. That is a little bit surprising to me, but certainly you've built plenty of cameras to keep us entertained for a good few hours. So let's get back to camera building.
Okay.
You have made a bunch of pinholes, a bunch of lensed cameras. Um, kind of, where did it go from your 5x7 camera? I know you're up to 8x10 now. I assume you'll be at 20x24 by this time next year.
Probably.
But what are some of your most and least favorite cameras that you've built?
Well, the least favorite was the first one I ever built. It was like a circular box, like gift box. That was the least favorite, only because I had to cut the paper in a circle, and I would never be able to cut it nice enough to fit inside the box. So that was the worst one. I think the best one is probably the 8x10.
The one from your most recent video?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. I was
yeah.
watching that again this morning. But
Yeah,
we will
that's
talk about that one in a minute. I gotta save that. Okay, so here's a question: do you build cameras because you want to make a certain type of camera that you don't have and try it out, or do you have like more of a I want to do this project, or I know we're going to talk about alternative processes, something that we're both pretty down that rabbit hole right now. Are you building cameras for projects or processes, or just for the cameras themselves? What usually is sort of the spark?
well, actually, one thing that I, to getting into the 8x10, it really started off with the cyanotype process, which I wanted to do in-camera cyanotypes. That's kind of how it started, where I was thinking of 8x10. I just don't see cyanotypes smaller than that, but that's personally for me. And so I started to look into building one that I could use for in-camera cyanotypes. But the story really starts off with discovering a particular process called Cyanotype Rex. And from the Cyanotype Rex, it just brought me to so many different other processes. And I've read a lot of the old books, like really old books, and what I was trying to find was a formula that would have a very high sensitivity, because the regular cyanotype chemistry, it would take way too long. And so anyways, I built that camera initially for that. But as I was building it, then my mind started to say, hey, paper negatives. And also, too, there was a little bit of inspiration from the paper reversal process, which I was inspired by Don Frula. I think you know him, Ethan. I don't know if
Yeah, me too. I don't know him personally,
Yeah.
but I know him on the internet. That's what started me.
And also Joe Van Cleve as well. And you too. You're one of the ones that I followed as well with that process. But I saw the process much bigger than a 4x5, which also influenced me to make that 8x10 camera. So initially I made the 8x10, and I had a magnifying glass on there alone. And then I had built I guess you can say just made like a F11 sized hole that I placed over it. So if I wanted to use the cyanotype process, I would use it without the aperture that I made at F11. And then when I would use paper negatives, then I would put that over on top. But I thought it was just too confusing, so I ended up, which I don't think I showed anywhere yet, but I ended up building a second 8x10, one specifically for the cyanotype, and then one specifically for paper negatives, and just kind of left them separate. And it just kind of, I don't know, my brain just doesn't stop. I just think of one thing and it just dives into something else. And that's kind of how the 8x10 build came around. The 4x5s, especially the latest one I've done, which was the multi-pinhole, that I specifically did it for Worldwide Pinhole Day. I started off with only thinking of doing 3 holes, and then as I started to build it, I said, you know what, I'm going to do 6, and then I said, you know what, I'm going to do 9, and then it ended up being 9. 9 is actually my favorite number, so I said, you know what, I'm going to do 9 holes. So it just ended up, I ended up making it just in time as well. So it's very tricky because making the pinholes, that's probably was the thing that had me the most nervous, because I was so scared that I would punch the holes too big, or that the holes would be all different aperture sizes. So I said, okay, I'm going to take a needle, a sewing needle, and use that as to make my hole. At first I made the holes, I did my first test, the holes weren't big enough. So I had to go back and readjust the holes, and then I managed to make the holes pretty much even, because how I tested it, I opened the holes all at the same time. And I just wanted to see how the gradient of the tones would fall. And after I processed that, I looked and I said, okay, it seems to be right. It seems to be even all across the board.
Can I ask you something about this camera? First of all, I want to send some people to where they can see it. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is at Nicole Small Journal Entries.wordpress.com/camera-builds. Now that's a long address, but it will be in the show notes. Yeah. I already have it linked for the show notes. But I want to describe this box, if I can, for just a second. Sure. It looks like it's made out of foam core. Am I right?
Yes, you're right.
Okay, so it's made out of foam core. It has a 4x5 holder at the back that's held on by Velcro. I love that idea. I love the Velcro. And then it has 9 holes in a grid on the front. Now, my question is this 9 separate images? Are there dividers in there? Or is this a blender image where all 9 holes will all fall on that same single sheet of paper and they'll overlap and do all that type of thing?
What I used to actually organize the way the holes are is I went to the dollar store and I bought for those ice cube trays.
Okay, sure.
It's an ice cube tray that has, but it was round, it was circular. They had square and they had circular ones. And I thought, you know what, let's try and do something a little different. So I took the circular ones. So at the bottom there, it's like a rubber that I was able to cut off. And so there's a little bit of it's almost a little tubular in this for each circle. So I was able to kind of separate each hole. But I also actually created it longer by just taking some cardboard paper, construction paper, making a circle, sticking it inside to make them longer, to separate them even more. So that I have to work on though, because it was really shoddy done. It was done very quickly. They weren't perfectly round, and Some of them weren't the same length, but I was trying to get something,
Okay.
you know.
So this is on your Instagram. You have a self-portrait with this camera. Am I right? For Pinhole Day, Worldwide Pinhole Day 2020. Is that the one that's on your Instagram?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's kind of semi-blender and semi-distinct. Okay. I'm really digging this. Okay.
This is so for our listeners. This is last week, and for Graham and Nick and I, it's last week. For you, it'll come out next week before this episode. But we're Graham. Like, what did we talk for like an hour last week about ice cube tray photos?
Yeah.
Ice cube tray
really?
camera photos. Yeah, this is really super cool.
And this is different from what I would had envisioned, and it blends in a way that is very distinct from blender cams and very distinct from what they used to call postage stamp cameras, where each one of those 9 holes would have a distinct image, and essentially it's a camera to reproduce a single image 9 times or 24 times or how many ever little holes and channels they have. And and this is interesting.
This thing looks like a kaleidoscope to me, like a really sort of soft blended, beautiful kaleidoscope. I'm really into it.
Yeah.
The only thing I probably would change is probably the center hole. I would probably make it smaller than the rest of them. Only because I find that because it's circular and it overlaps, you start to lose in the center. Like, it starts to lose a little bit more than I would like to. Like, the contrast kind of dies out a little bit. That's maybe something that I would probably try and see how that would look, if it would kind of maintain a little bit more of the contrast in the center. I probably would make the center hole a little bit smaller than the rest of the holes, because that's the main image. So if I do the center image, say alone, for example, and then maybe I want to open the other holes after, the exposure is still going in the center because it just overlaps into it. So I probably would the center a little smaller. That would be something that I would do. Of course, I didn't have the time to do it, but that's something I would correct. Yeah.
Hey, I would like to make a technical suggestion.
Sure.
I think maybe a lot of photographers don't know about this, but a lot of electronics people do, is PCB drill bits. I've been preaching from the Church of PCB micro drills for quite some time. They sell them for drilling like vias and through holes in circuit boards, but Amazon will sell packs of 10 of one size or 10 in multiple sizes, and they allow you to drill like really precise diameter tiny holes in soda cans, which I wind up spending a lot of my life doing. And if you're trying to get like a ratio between pinholes, my hands are too shaky to do it with a pin. You can get a round hole.
Right.
But yeah, check out PCB micro drills on Amazon.
Oh, I will.
Cool.
And you want to start off with, they come in sets, and they usually start with 0.3 of a millimeter. And you really want the smaller sets that start at 1/10 of a millimeter or 0.15. And that will give you a good range going up to, an 8x10. But for smaller objects, you want to start at 0.15. But they're out there, and we're talking $10, which is what that's $1,000 Canadian or something like that. But $10. So, but yeah, they work really well. And one of the things about that is then you can start getting uniform, and you can start doing the exact, like you can do those outer holes 0.25 and the inner hole 0.15 or something like that, and you can really get good technical ability on that. But I'm sorry to derail you on this. I think that you finished the idea of making that center pinhole smaller.
Yeah.
But
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I'm curious about how you. It sounds like you open different lenses or different pinholes in a sequence sometimes. How do you control them separately? What's the shutter method?
I just had tape. It was just tape.
So tape over each one, and then you just open the ones you want. Yeah.
Yeah, but I find that the 9 holes for the 4x5 might be a little too much. Maybe if it was maybe a 5x7 or even 8x10 with the 9 holes, I just found it was a little too much. At least for me, when I was trying to do different different positions. I found it was just too cluttery. Like, you couldn't really see too much. It was just too many holes. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
yeah. I love that your solution
5-hole system.
Yeah, I love that your solution to 9 holes being too much is not less holes. It's bigger film.
that's
It's
it.
like a real photographic megalomania, which I love.
8x10 soon, guys.
Awesome. I can't wait.
I think it makes sense, though. You get a lot of combinations with more holes. And
yeah. So it can be too much, you know.
The downside is you're going to need a bigger ice cube tray.
That's it. That's it. And probably the holes will obviously be more further apart, which will probably give more room for you to see more of the complete circles of each. I would think. So it could be interesting, you know. Could be interesting. But I know...
Oh, I was just going to say, on an 8x10, you could do toilet paper tubes or paper towel tubes.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I think that you would have enough room within that 8x10 to make those, I guess, light channels is what they are. They're light channels.
Exactly.
Ah, cool.
Yeah. There is, I mean, I was trying to... I added a tube in the center, and I was trying to get my face in that hole, but it was so hard to do. I just couldn't do it. I was either like too high or too low. So, you know, but again, it just goes with practice and everything, you know. So I hope eventually I'll be able to get that right. I don't know, on my Instagram, there's the one that I think there's one with, you see my hands on the bottom of my face. That's the one I tried.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was a little hard to do, but I think it's interesting, you know, something different.
I wonder if you could, like, somehow attach a laser pointer to the thing and then have a mirror behind it so you could see, you know, if the dot was on your nose, then you would be in the right place.
Do not point a laser at your eyes.
Yes.
Safety third.
Yeah. What are you telling me?
Nose.
Yeah, well, I mean, your nose is dangerously close to your eyes.
Speak for yourself, Ethan.
Okay. And a little bit further down Nicole's Instagram, you get the supplies. And so you can see the ice cube tray and the duct tape and the foam board and all that type of stuff. So you can get a better idea of what we're talking about with the round ice cube trays. Now I see that this, you know, yours is it's a 4x5 film holder. The ice cube tray is actually 12 holes. And it's a 4x3 grid, but you only use the 3x3 grid.
Yeah.
But doesn't that 4x3 grid better fit the 4x5 size? So I'm just sending you back to the drawing board. Make another one, please, for the world.
Make another one.
So, yeah, say that again. Yeah, just make it. Yeah, just make it another. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah. So I mean, this kind of fits. I have the what I'm calling the COVID camera challenge, which is to build a camera out of stuff that you have at home. And I think that you said that you went out and bought the ice cube tray, but it looks like everything else is pretty standard household stuff. So this would work for that that COVID camera challenge, where you're stuck at home. One of the things that I thought was really exciting about that 9-hole pinhole was the idea that we've got the blurring and overlapping images. It's a pinhole. You're moving a little bit. You're mostly still on that one, that self-portrait. You're mostly still, but there's still a blurring of the image. What is it? And I find actually in a lot of your work, I see a lot of that where there's movement in the figure, there's movement in the model. And what is it about that attracts your eye? Why is that an image that you want to create versus taking this 8x10 and putting an 8x10 lens and using 8x10 film to get that super crisp, see every pore kind of image?
Well, I have that. So why not make something that's or work in a way that you can have the opposite of that? I mean, I have a 4x5 camera, which can give me the sharpness. And why not play with it in the other direction where there's blur, where there's movement? And I don't know why, but I'm just so attracted to it because I find it just, you can kind of like have something hidden within that movement, which is what I really like. And I just don't know, but I guess because I have the one side of it, I just like to play with the other side of it too. And I don't know, it's just what I love to do. It's something that I really enjoy.
Okay. So one of the things I also noticed is, like, for instance, you have 3 pictures of a lake shore. And yeah, on your Instagram, we're back on the Instagram feed.
Okay.
And it looks to me like there's a little bit of vertical drag, maybe from stand development. There's some vertical lines on these photographs that, once again, take it. I mean, they look like they're shot at a fairly fast shutter speed. They're waves. We can see I mean, they're not blurred waves or anything like that. Was there something about these that you worked on? This is, I think it says it's XP2. It's expired. Yeah. XP2.
That's the one thing. It's the XP2 film, which I did in black and white chemistry. And this is that I've noticed that happens when you do it in black and white chemistry. You sometimes there's like streaks in it. I don't know if it's just the way that I process it or whatever, but I love the contrast of that film. And when I started using XP2 at the time when I bought the film, I didn't know it was to be processed in C41.
Okay.
So my initial roll, I processed it in black and white. Of course, I did my research. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know this was C41. Has anybody been doing it in black and white chemistry? So I went online and I just, ended up falling onto some forums where people were talking about it. So then I just kind of gave a shot with it, and I had a portrait session, and I ended up doing it in black and white, and it came out really, really nice. I was like, oh my God, this is, I love it. And this is kind of the way that I've continually have processed XP2 film with black and white chemistry. It's still tinkering it with a little bit in regards to time, because now they're saying 12 minutes, of course, depending on what developer you're using. But I think 12 minutes is too long. I think there will have to be consideration of your scene when you're going to process the film in a black and white chemistry. So I'm still tinkering with that, but I do love the contrast and the look of this film. I really, really do.
Yeah,
one of the things. Oh, go ahead.
It looks great. I really like it a lot. And I have can I ask a question in the middle of all this, Grant?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
So what I see in a lot of your work is what I think of in artwork in general as being very poetic. So if, for instance, if you took a very standard, as you do, you have plenty of examples here of traditional, very clear photographic portraits, probably for clients, I don't know, but they're great, they're wonderful. They emphasize the appearance of a person. As soon as you start to make your multi-pinhole images and let some of this blurring and atmospheric effects come into the photograph, to me, it makes it possible to go in more directions. So one of these self-portraits you took with your multi-pinhole, it makes me think of like a flower bed. And, yes, it's a picture of people's faces or your faces repeated, but it also takes me in a whole bunch of other directions, and it reminds me of other things and makes other connections. And that's what I think of poetry as doing, is it bridges different worlds instead of just telling you the one story.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, they're beautiful, beautiful images.
Thank you very much.
So when there is you're doing a lot of portraits, it looks to me like with 4x5, or at least it's looking medium format, or we're getting a lot of detail. And then I noticed that there is a portrait on your Instagram of a woman where it is multiple exposures. I'm looking, it looks, maybe it's just a double exposure. And it's listed, let me see. It says Mamiya C330, and then it gives the year of 2013. Were these in camera multiple exposures, or are these after the fact multiple exposures, either with Photoshop or stacked images, or stacked negatives? Go ahead.
No, this is in camera. This is
in camera.
Yeah. One thing I'm very, very anal about is I always like to try to do everything in camera. I do not like to go into Photoshop. If I can avoid it at any cost, that's what I'll do. So if it's going to take me 10 minutes just to really structure myself to get that image, that's the time I'm going to take to do it. I really, really like to get it in camera. That's the way my mind works.
Swipe on the edge.
It's admirable, and I think that it's a useful way to work. But what happens to me, I'm actually pretty clumsy in Photoshop, so I often lower the quality of my photo when I'm struggling in the software. And so in some ways, it's sort of like my version of pinhole photography is, bad Photoshop.
Do you do any darkroom work? Do you have an enlarger and that type of thing?
I have two enlargers actually, and it's a pity because my bathroom is so small, and the ventilation is very bad in there. So that's one reason why
I noticed your respirator in your last video too.
And that's the problem that I have, which kind of, I don't feel inspired so much to go into the darkroom, although I really would love to get into printing more. I did do a few prints in the very beginning, but then it just became a little, it's just like, I'm like, oh man, all of the setup that I have to do, and it's just kind of demotivating. But I have to a place to get a darkroom space. I have been looking into that, but now with this thing that's going on, I don't know what's going to happen anymore. But I was looking for a space just to have it for darkroom work. And I don't know what's going to happen with that, but I try to push myself to do it, but it's just, oh man.
It sort of
Yes.
reminds. I mean, to me, darkroom work, it is. That's what Photoshop is. It's like all this extra homework that's getting between your time when you have your vision and when you actually end up with your final image, and it takes up a lot of time and energy in the same way.
It is certainly a much slower pace than Photoshop, and it does require a much larger commitment of time. Mm-hmm. And and you're saying you're doing it in your bathroom. That's exactly the way I do it. In fact, my Enlarger lives out in a shed, and I have to haul that in. Then I have to black out the windows, and then I have to set up the trays, and I have to do all of that. And I have figured that it is an hour of setup and an hour of teardown. So that's 2 hours before I can even choose a negative. Yeah. I have plans. I'm going to have some time off in a couple of weeks, and I have plans to set up my darkroom and leave it set up. I have multiple bathrooms in my house, so I can at least use other bathrooms, right? And leave it set up so that I can do that. I can get deeper in. I have not talked to my wife about that yet, but we'll see how that goes. But I do understand the idea of having the desire to get in there, but also, oh my God, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, so, I have to prep myself mentally like a few days before and say, okay, well, pre-prep this, prep that, and then I can say, okay, the day now I'm ready to go. If I don't pre-prep, I know that I'm not going to go in there. So that's, it's like a 2-3 day thing, even before you start.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm totally with you. And if you think about that, it's that 2 or 3 day thing. Even if for the people who have a darkroom set up, they've got to go out and get their chemistry out and do all that type of stuff and have time to clean it and do all those types of things. And, we talk a lot in the analog film world about how, analog's better, but, those digital tools that we also use are pretty good.
Nicole, you do a lot of alternate process work, and we've spoken before about this reversal process, and I've been really excited to see, where a lot of people, particularly you, have sort of taken this reversal process and what you've made with it. I want to ask you about that, but first, you mentioned something earlier, which I've never done. Maybe I did it once as like a little kid in school, which is cyanotypes, and then you mentioned Cyanotype Rex, which I've never heard of. It sounds like a dinosaur, which is up my alley. So how'd you get into cyanotypes? What about it is interesting to you, and what's Cyanotype Rex, and how do they differ?
Again, when I started shooting film, it opens so much doors to the many different things that people used to do and still do. And I just came across the cyanotype. I don't really remember where I saw it or how I came about, but it just ended up falling into my lap on a search. And I was like, oh, this looks quite interesting. And then I just kind of said, I think I'd like to give it a shot. So got the chemicals and everything, and I just tried playing around with it. And I really, really, I love the process. It's a very simple process. It's very easy. I don't have to be locked in the dark so much. Which is kind of, a difference from the struggle that I had with printing. And then over time, it became a goal of mine. Every summer, I would take the time to create a series of cyanotypes. Last year was the first year that I didn't. And I only realized near the end of summer that I said, I didn't do any cyanotypes this year. And, I started to think about it and said, I got to do something next year. I'm not going to miss another year. And I just started to think, I wonder if you could do cyanotypes in camera. And that's how this Cyanotype Rex came about. Because when I would search in camera cyanotypes, Cyanotype Rex kept popping up. So I was like, what is this Cyanotype Rex thing? Anyways, it was I guess you can call him a photographer. He's no longer here today. His name is Terry King. And he invented this so-called process Cyanotype Rex, which was it's a process that you can do in camera, where the speed of the emulsion itself works out much faster than the average formula that you can buy today. And over time, I just started to search Cyanotype Rex. So that's really what it is. It's just like to be able to do it in camera. But it was really tricky because going on a lot of these forums, although there's a wealth of information, you can really get confused at the same time because you have one person saying this and then one person saying that. And it seemed to me that the Rex process was actually kind of a hush-hush thing. Nobody really wanted to, share the actual full process. Even Terry King himself, who had invented this process, he was very hush-hush about his process. So, over time, I just fell into these old books on alternative processes, which you can find on Google Books. And then I started to read about the older versions of the cyanotype formulas and trying to see, okay, well, which would give me the most sensitivity? And then I fell into the pellets process, which is another process that is actually where I'm at with the cyanotype process. And it's instead of white on blue, it's blue on white, and it's a positive image. So if I was to shine, so hoping that will work, thinking that if I create this camera and then say, for example, I would do a self-portrait, it would come out as a positive. So that's kind of where I'm at with the cyanotype process. But again, there's so much information. It's incredible. And there's so many ways of doing it. There's so many techniques. It's just crazy. So I kind of had to balance myself out by taking one book, and I'm going to be reading through one book, and then if that doesn't work out, then I'll go to the next one. So that's kind of how it started,
So we'll get there when we talk about the reversal process that we've been working on. But, when I got interested in it, I saw some videos from Joe Van Cleve before we were friends and Don Frula. And I think you and I have watched the same videos probably 100 times. And it was so Don Frula is clearly a genius, but he is also not like a large YouTuber. Once in a while, he'll put like an explanatory video up, and I will pester him in the comments for more information. And then I found on like Photrio, which is like an old APUG thread, these guys had been working for like 5 years on that reversal process. And I tried it, I had terrible results, and then I sat down and I read every post. It took me 3 hours. I read 5 years worth of posts back and forth of these people testing it. And then I made this YouTube video, and it went from like 12 people in the world who knew about it to a few thousand, and I think I was the first to like actually just keep the YouTube video concise and try and be as clear, if not an interesting YouTube video about it. And like that kind of, I think, blew it up, right? Like Matt Marash is doing it, you're doing it, like a lot of, you can't stay hush-hush or like you bury things in internet forums when somebody puts it on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And so maybe I would love to see you make a YouTube video about the Cyanotype Rex process. I think that would get me off the couch for sure.
The only problem is that this weather sucks, man. There's no sun. I'm telling you.
You know, when we were talking about YouTube, I was actually watching some of your YouTube videos this morning, again, and showing them to my girlfriend, and I was saying that you're always in like the dreariest forests, and I want to say like, Nicole, just move to the Southwest or somewhere. It looks so. I mean, I grew up, not super far from you, but oh man, the long, like, in between nice winter and good weather again is
Referring to mud season.
Yeah, I don't like mud season. I feel like you need to take some vacations.
I don't know. It makes me nostalgic. I haven't lived back there in decades, and I like seeing those woods. I grew up in them, and there's a mood there. It's a pain in the ass not to have enough light, especially with alternative process. But I like that. I like the murky stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they're good photos, but I mean, springtime is also nice.
Yeah, you're right. And we have this unnaturally sunny spring happening now in the Northwest due to climate change, and it's actually pretty fun to see the sun early.
Okay, so besides me, being crotchety about the weather in the Northeast, Nicole, you shoot so much stuff indoors, right? I have seen. I was remarking this morning on the fact that you have like hundreds of dollars worth of video or studio lights set up to shoot with cardboard boxes, which I absolutely love. How about indoor cyanotype video, or is it just not? It's not fast enough.
Oh, it's not fast enough. It just would take way too. I mean, it's in the way that I would like to do it. It would just take way too long. But my goal is to try to, like, from reading these books, I hope I would find some formula that's really, really sensitive that it could work. But I have to try them out to see, and there's quite a bit out there to try. So,
my formula for the reversal process slowness was to buy 20,000 watt seconds worth of speedotron lights.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I have a question. I've been toying with the idea, but not getting around to it. In our long dark winters of taking lights out into the woods, is that something you've tried at all?
No, I never have. It's too cold.
That's true.
It's too cold out here.
True. Yeah.
Maybe
you can get some old hot lights and melt a hole in the snow for yourself.
I mean, and I do have hot lights. I mean, that's how I started with pinhole photography, was with hot lights. In the very, very beginning, that's all the lights that I had that were constant, and it was also in the winter months. So that's the only reason why I really ended up doing it inside, is because it was winter, and
right.
I wouldn't advise anyone to do it, because it's just, I mean, I would get burns. I mean, they had to be literally a foot to a foot and a half away from me to get
an
amount of time. Yeah. But when you're determined and you're focused to do something, you don't care, right? So you do it. But over time, I ended up getting some LED lights, because it's just becoming too much. It's just really, really. Sometimes
right.
I think, I'm like, how did I do that?
Yeah, and they don't burn so much power, which I guess you'd have to drag a generator out in the woods too if you were gonna use a lot of light.
Yeah. But at the same time, I prefer the look that I get with the hot lights versus the LED lights. I hands down, it's you get a completely different look. I don't even know if I can really explain it, but I just love the way the hot lights just render with the paper than the
Nicole,
LEDs.
do you mean like tonally, or like, I really love how consistent your images are, in that they're almost all blurred, but just like super slightly, right? Like for effect, and they're blurred the same amount, and it's consistent kind of through your work that I've been watching for more than a year now. Is it the speed of the hot lights, or the sort of tones that are picked up on the paper that appeals to you?
The tones on the paper, there's a lot more contrast with the hot lights. I get with the hot lights than I do with the LEDs. Even with working with film, you get a completely different. I don't know. I guess from doing it so much, I just see it. It's just very different, you know. It's just.
Well, so even with black and white, you're going to get a different part of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Light,
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to change.
I guess it's almost to say, you know, working with natural light versus working with flash with film. I guess maybe it's something like that, you know, like the sun just, I don't know, working with the sun just to me has much more of a nicer, I don't know. I don't know if you get that.
No, you're right. I think you're right.
Yeah. But never again the hot lights. No way, Jose.
Too hot.
Too hot.
Okay, so I guess I am really looking forward to Cyanotype Rex when you can go outside and it's summertime in another like 35 months in Montreal.
Give me hope, please.
Yeah. But you have been making a bunch of reversal process videos. I saw you did one with iron out. You did one which I thought was crazy with like dichromate bleach, and you were wearing a respirator around your neck, which seemed like one, badass, and two, I would not want to do. Do you have any reversal process projects that you're thinking about doing in the near-ish future? And kind of, I guess, beyond that, which version of the reversal process, I guess the black and white one we can talk about first, which version have you found to be the most successful or interesting or fun to you?
The potassium dichromate actually seems to be the best for me, although it's the most more talked about. But that I find works very. Again, that's Don Frula. He's the one that really helped guide me into, you know, the formula and all that kind of stuff. So he took step by step. You know, he went through. Okay, this is what you must do. Be careful because of this. He really helped me big time. You know, with that. But I think that process, that way of doing it, it works. It works for me. It does. It works for me. You know. And rinsing at the end, you don't have to rinse as long, so that's kind of a bonus. But the way of doing it with the citric acid and the hydrogen peroxide, it's good, but the only issue.
Slow.
I don't really mind that it's slower. It's just that the hydrogen peroxide, it goes fast, and it seems to be something hard to get now here in Canada. I went to a health food store and I ordered it online. I ordered it and they said, okay, come in a few
Nicole,
days.
you're going to pay through the nose if you go through a health food store.
Yeah, no, but it wasn't even that. They called me back and they said, we can't sell this to you. And I said, why? And he said, well, because of the toxicity and you know, the strength of it. I'm like, but, you know, I put in the order, and he said, sorry, we can't. So even trying to find it on other, you know, online somewhere, it seems to be harder to get.
Okay.
That's because people are using it to kill virus with. That's where that went.
Well, but also you can get 40V hydrogen peroxide bleach from any beauty supply, or like particularly like the beauty supply places that supply hair salons. You want to get the crystal clear with stabilizer, not the cream version. I had a couple people try and do it with cream and report back they had a goopy mess.
I was one of those that did not work.
No. Yeah. So you like the dichromate bleach version, which is the version that was in those little photo mats back in the analog photo mat days that I loved and smelled weird. Are you thinking about shooting some upcoming projects with it?
Yes, I am. If I can only get out there and do it, you know. I do have a few ideas. I don't want to share them though. I don't want to share it.
Okay,
Be a surprise.
Listeners, stay tuned to Nicole's YouTube channel.
Yeah, but there's quite a few things that I have a list and I'm gonna eventually get through them. But yes, I do want to do a series of portraits with it. Yeah, that's all I'm gonna say.
Okay, and is it included in the secret that you have been interested in the color reversal process, or can we talk about that?
That I'm still trying to figure out. The issue is the color filtration. That's the part that I find is very, very tricky.
Yes.
A first batch, which was awful, very bad, but I then said, okay, I'm gonna just give myself a break, and then I tried to do a second batch, and they came out a little bit better, but it's really, really rough. But I don't know if this would make sense to you, Ethan, because I was thinking, if I was to take, do you initially know the color temperature of the paper itself? Does the paper itself have a color temperature?
Well, so we talked about this maybe 2 months ago. I think it is kind of a moving target, right? So every, and I think I mentioned this, is every batch of color paper will come with some base filtration for the batch, but my problem with it is it's a moving target, and so I think there's actually, people get super frustrated with me because everybody wants the silver bullet answer. Use these filters, right? But the actual answer is there's a lot of moving factors in this process that requires you to actually do some tests before you get going every single time. And the reason behind that is the developer temperature and age will affect the color balance. Also, it's a nonlinear response to your light, so depending upon, I'm using basically the same color lights every time, although, they get slightly warmer as the tubes get older, but, I don't pop the flashes that much. But every time I do it, I expect to shoot 2 or 3 images. And I start, basically where I left off the last time in terms of filtration, right? But my chemistry has gotten a little older. And you could either buy or build a, temperature control bath, or even use a tabletop temperature controlled paper processor. And you could even get really crazy and use a commercial one that has auto replenishment. But chemistry ages. Even within, a batch, if you're going to process a bunch of things, chemistry oxidizes. I don't bother controlling the temperature because really where I want to use the process is outdoors in self-developing cameras and a Polaroid, right? And so if I have to be, in a temperature control process, I need some large, heavy equipment that I really can't just take with me, Yeah. And so my answer has been, shoot 45 terrible pictures, get one good one, record the base filtration, and then every time I start, I'll shoot 2 or 3, just to get it right before I, bother somebody to stand in front of my camera.
Because I had this thought, and the reason why I asked you that is because this is how I was thinking. I was thinking, what if, for example, if you were to know, let's just say we know the exact temperature of this paper, and let's say we were to take a digital camera and put it at that same, and then place our filters over it to see how much of that we would actually
You have hit on something, and I think, yes, this is maybe an iPhone app I should write one of these days, but I think it would only get you so close, right? Because when you buy black and white film or color film, they give you the tone curves or the sensitivity of each one of the emulsion layers, and usually there's a red, green, and blue little curve. The sensitivity of each of the color layers is not the same. And the same deal goes for any digital camera sensor. And on top of that, they're not linear, and the curves are different between your digital camera and any given film stock. And so, like, yeah, you could write a transformation of the digital camera sensitivity curves onto any emulsion film or paper sensitivity curves, and you could, write a compensating program for any given color filter pack. But then still, you're going to have like temperature and age of chemistry and paper at play, and so I think it would only get you so close. Mm-hmm. I really feel like I have been able to, in 2 or 3 shots, get there every time, but still, it might save you 1 shot in the test series.
Okay, so Ethan, when you're starting with your filters that you found in the past, work with the paper you use, and you're going to do 2 or 3 test shots, can you describe what it actually looks like? In other words, are you looking at it and saying that needs a bit more red and just going with a little more of a red, or what are you actually doing?
Sure. So one thing that I want to mention first before I get into this is that those tone curves of each of the color layers are really wacky and nonlinear, and so you are never ever going to have a picture in this process where all of the colors are quote unquote correct, right? Faithful, high fidelity. If you had like one of those color checkers that's like, all of the different colors in little squares, you could get 1 or 2 to match your color checker test chart, but all of the rest are going to be translated off of their target colors, right? And so let's say red was faithful, but blue was not. If you then adjust the blue, now your red is not going to be faithful, if you're filtering the entire image. And we could get into engineering solutions that involve big cameras and beam splitters and yada, yada. But let's just keep it kind of simple right now. And so, I do not care about color fidelity. If fidelity was my issue, I got a Sony A7, it's good. I got an iPhone, it's good at fidelity. What I am concerned with is, the beauty. I am concerned with beauty alone, or just sort of like a pleasing image, right? And so the first thing, and Nick, I am getting to your question. The first thing that I'm interested in is what is important to me in the photo to be either faithful or pleasing. Generally, what I like to shoot in this process is also portraits, right? And so the only thing I really care about is skin tones. If your shirt is translated, like if I have a gray shirt and it shows up red and my white background shows up blue, don't care. Makes the image interesting. It's an artifact of the process. It's part of why I do it. But if, my friend Gerson shows up blue, he looks dead, and that's not cool. And I have that picture. I still like that picture, but I wish Gerson was more red. And so it's basically the same as like a Photoshop or a darkroom printing process. I don't know if you printed color negatives, but, you use a base filtration on a dichroic head or in a filter pack, you make a print. And in the same way I would use a base filtration, I'd shoot a picture, I'd make the print. And then I just look, are the skin tones too blue, too red, too yellow? And then sometimes I do a little cheat, which is look at them through, so I look at the print, let's say Gerson is blue. I want to make it a little bit more yellow. And so then I would take out my pack of Rat and gels and look at the print through a bunch of yellow filters. And, looking at the print through filters like a color printing test filter pack is not going to give you one-to-one results, right? If it looks perfect through the filter, it's not necessarily going to look perfect, under the strobe lights after the processing, but it gets you, it's a good proxy and it gets you close. And so, I try and look through enough yellow filters that Gerson looks correct. I put the filters into the camera or in front of the lens. And then I think about, and you can use a digital camera or a light meter to figure out or even just the data sheet that comes with the Ratten filter to figure out how many stops of exposure you need to add for the additional filtration or subtract for any filters you're removing. And then, it's just repeat that process, 2 or 3 times. And I think it's been really, I don't want to say easy because it's time consuming, but it's easy in that it's straightforward to find a pleasing skin tone. And yeah, I mean, that's it. Guess and check.
Yeah,
Oldest engineering trick.
And that describes my struggles to render print. When I scan film, color film, and then try and get it right in Photoshop, that's exactly the same kind of struggle I go through. And it's part of what I like about it is that you don't end up with perfect fidelity in color. Sometimes it gets out of control and it looks terrible, but having things a little bit off always makes me happier.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I don't feel this way about engineering. I'd like everything to be perfectly doing what I want it to do. But I think a lot of people who are not engineers think of engineering as like you sit down, you be really smart, and then you make a thing correctly. But like every engineer I know knows that they are not that smart, no matter how smart they are. Right? There's some amount of cleverness, but it's also just getting anything right is like an iterative process, and you got to get it like any success mandatorily requires a whole bunch of like quote failures to get there, but it's just data points.
Yeah, I think isn't that essentially what calculus is? Targeted failure.
No. I think calculus is pretty exact. But yeah. Hey Nicole, that sort of brings me to another question about your cameras, and maybe this certainly applies to your clearly you've been guessing and checking and testing and trying again in your processing and alternative process work. How about cameras? Like, how often do you build a camera and either build a second camera or tear your first camera apart and rebuild it? What's that process look like for you?
The first camera that I built for the Cyanotype, actually in-camera Cyanotype, I did actually start off with a 4x5 in mind. And I built it incorrectly. I built it too long. And with the Cyanotype process, it can't be a camera that's very long. It has to have a very short focal length. It's just the way it has to go because of the emulsion. But I did actually build it, and then I had to lengthen. I had built it, and then I had to lengthen it. So I lengthened it, and then after I realized it's too long, so then I kind of tore that one up, and then I rebuilt a second one, and yeah. So, but it's I like it though. I don't mind. I like it, and you learn as you go, and you think of different things as you go too. So it's a hit or miss sometimes. So yeah.
Right, so the camera has to be short enough for the light to be intense enough.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So, Nicole, I'm a huge fan of your YouTube channel. I feel like it is the kind of 1980s PBS, very relaxing, like kind of matter of fact and school teachery. Like, this is something we're going to learn today. Like, if Mr. Rogers had a segment on alternative process photography, you would be that segment. I'm really into it, and on top of that, even better is you're always investigating things that I care about and am interested in, and I can't wait for more secret alternative process videos when the weather gets better. But I wanted to ask you, how did you get started on YouTube, and sort of how have you gotten sucked into that? You're a pretty prolific creator, and how does that tie into your photographic work?
Originally, I started doing videos of people, actually. I would do small segments of, I call the videos I Am, and it was kind of documenting a person that was willing to do it. And I would just film them. That's really how my YouTube channel started. It was not with photography. And then I was kind of out there trying to, say, hey, who would be interested in doing one of these videos with me? But it didn't really take too much. And so my YouTube channel was inactive for quite some time. And then one day I just said to myself, you know what? I don't really document the things that I do. Aside from maybe the few photos that I'll put on Facebook about here, this is what I did, or this is what I'm going to do. I said, I don't really have it documented. So I just started to, one day, went to Oka Beach. It's about a beach that's about 2 hours away from here. And that was my very first video. And I just said, I'm just going to document what I'm going to do. And it just started like that. There was no real deep thought. It just happened. And from the first time I did it, I said, I really like it. And then I just kept doing it. And then it just kind of grew and grew and grew to the amount of videos that I have now. So that's basically it, really.
I think you should call Tom Hanks about doing that Mr. Rogers episode. I think that
I think it's fun. It's really fun too. And I think also, to some degree, you post on Facebook and you post on Instagram, and you can express and you can explain something, but I think the video is just so much more better at doing that. And I kind of like for people to see my journey, and when I'm focused on something and how I do it or how I go about it, I really like to share those kind of things. So this is another reason why I started to really take to YouTube, because it just brings so much more to you as an artist, you as a person, and it's fun. It's fun. Yeah.
Yeah. There's some things that there's just no better way to explain than to just show it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like YouTube. When I started Cameradactyl, I really ignored YouTube just because I only had so much personal bandwidth. But this year, I've been really thinking about it a lot harder, just because it's a great way to hold somebody's attention and like teach them something. Whereas in writing, if you have somebody who's really wants to figure something out, they'll read your writing. But I find it's just like much easier for me to cram some information down somebody's throat if I do it in video.
And if you have something that you want to describe and you're writing a lot, I think people will lose interest very quickly now. So if you have this page and you see all this writing, it's like, oh my God, all of that, but if you have a video, it's just right there in front of them. So it's much more engaging, for the person to actually stick around and watch from beginning to end.
You're a different generation. I can sit and read a book all day long, and I don't spend that much time on YouTube, but I understand the power of it. Definitely.
Yes, I myself, I will read, but sometimes when I post something and maybe I'm asking a question or maybe something, and then people will just like it, and I'm like, well, I don't think they read what I wrote. Like, people don't read.
Yeah, they looked at the caption picture.
They just look at the picture and that's it, and they'll flip. And this is the thing. It's like, no, you're supposed to read. You're supposed to read it. So, the video kind of helps with that, I think.
No, I think you're right, and it also lets you do sort of two things at once, because you can be showing something by doing it, and you speak at the same time. I mean, that's part of the power of speaking is it's the original multitasking.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Yeah.
So, Nicole, you're actually like a pretty prolific writer, right? Like, you are one of the only people I know in this day and age who has like a written blog, which has a lot of photos on it, which is great. I wonder how, like, how can I phrase this? I lost track of my questions. Time note. Have you considered making like photo books or sort of like mix of photo and words books out of some of your blog material, or have you used some of that writing in your YouTube videos, or sort of how do those interrelate?
The only thing I can tell you is that I just write what's on my mind, and I just write what I'm feeling, and wherever it so happens to end up, that's where it goes. I don't really, I don't study too much of anything. I just do it. Like, I think in my head, this is what I want to do, and this is what I want to say, and it just comes out. I don't like to program myself too much. I want it to be as authentic as possible, and that's just how I look at it. I just go about it very simply, and
well, it really is working, I have to say.
Oh, thank you. I don't like it to be too textbook like, I just do whatever it is on my mind, and I write how I feel about it, and that's basically how it just ended up going and going and going. Because originally, when I started this blog, it was in 2012. I really didn't know what I was doing. I was just putting up a photo, a little bit of text, and that was it. I didn't really know how to write, what to write. Then you start looking at, okay, people are telling you, well, this is how you write a blog, and this is what you should say, and this is how you can plan your blog posts a month in advance. And I just couldn't do it. I just, it's not real. It just didn't feel right. And then I just said, you know what? I'm just going to do my own thing. And if today I don't have anything to say, I don't have anything to say. But if I have something next week to say every day that week, then I'm just going to let it rip, and I'm just going to put it out there. So I just really go as it suits me, as it's suitable for me, and it's just, the reality of it, and that's my approach.
Nicole, one of the things that we like to do on this show, and we're going to do this more and more as we move forward, is acknowledge people in our pasts who have helped us get to where we are. Now, usually in a positive way, but it could be in a negative way that still pushes us to a place where we would not otherwise have gotten. And so who is it? Is there anybody in your past who you would like to just say thank you for saying the right thing at the right time, for introducing you to something at the right time, that really is instrumental in who you are today and where you are in your life?
As a matter of fact, I do. His name is Randy Mayer. And it's a funny story because I one day was going to a camera shop that just sold film cameras. And later on, he had entered the store. He was talking to the salesperson about large format cameras. So I was like kind of listening in, oh my God, because at the time, it was a time where I wanted to go bigger. And I ended up kind of interrupting their conversation, and I asked him by any chance if he taught large format, and he said as a matter of fact, he does. That's kind of how we ended up connecting, and then over time, we just ended up developing a really great relationship, and he was the one that taught me a lot of the ins and outs about film, how to deal with film, how to kind of gave me ideas of how to process. If I was to, especially in regards to pushing and pulling, because that was one thing that I did not understand. There were times where I shot the film incorrectly, and he was able to help me figure that out. But most importantly, it was that he pushed me to do my first solo exhibit. And if it wasn't for him, I don't think I ever would have gone to depth or that route or even thought of doing it. And in so many other ways, he's helped me a lot in building myself as an artist and also in the direction that I'm in now. So I have to send him a really huge thank you. There's a lot of things I don't think I would have been able to have maybe done or even thought of doing to get to where I am now. And I thank him big time for that.
All right. And what our last question that we always ask all of our guests, is there anything that you would like to talk about that we did not ask you about? Anything that that's exciting to you that we have not asked about?
I'm actually looking into making an emulsion for paper and emulsion for film. That's one of my big things that is also kind of in the works here.
Please tell me you're going to make a YouTube video about this.
Oh, definitely I will.
Oh, I can't wait.
For sure. But that's another goal of mine. Ever since I started to play around with making my own developers, it's just, I said, well, I can make my own stop. I can make my own fix. Well, what if I thought of making an emulsion for paper? And this is kind of where I'm at in that respect. And film, too, is another thing that I'm looking to try to see if I can actually work that out. I don't know how that'll go, but those are two big main goals that I have and that I am actually working on. I'm doing a lot of reading right now, learning a lot about the chemicals, the chemistry, and so that's kind of the most exciting thing right now that's also in the works too. Yeah.
That's one thing that I've kind of wanted to do myself, to the point where I bought 1,000 feet of 35 millimeter clear leader. It's perforated and all that. So if you want 100 feet of clear leader for 35 millimeter film, let me know and I'll send it to you. Because I'm considerably further away from achieving that goal than I would like to be. But it's in the back of my head.
Oh,
so
wow.
So I'm excited. I'm excited to hear what you discover.
That's super cool. Where did you get that? Where did you buy that?
Oh, I bought it on eBay. And I think it cost me and it came from Russia, and with shipping it was $35, so it's not a problem at all. It's out there.
Awesome. That's so cool. That's so cool.
So, we want to know, how can people get a hold of you? Email, the web, what's your YouTube channel, all those different types of things.
Okay, well, there's my Instagram, which is where I'm mainly on, and that's Nicole Small _1on1. There's also my blog or my journal entry blog, and that's NicoleSmallJournalEntries.wordpress.com. And I will change that somehow and make it much shorter. As I can see, it's very long. And then I have my YouTube channel, and unfortunately, it's a very long URL, so I'm not sure how I would. If you look up Nicole Small 1on1, you'll find me.
Or check the description in the show notes.
Yeah,
that's right. We've got it in there.
Unfortunately, I don't have my name in the YouTube URL, so I'm able to give the exact URL. And of course, I'm also on Facebook, and that's One-on-One Arts. It's a different name because I had my name. I was using a different name before, but I changed it, and of course, I can't change it on Facebook. So it's One-on-One Arts, all one word. And I think that's about it. That's where you can find me.
All right. Nick, how can people get a hold of you?
Well, there's the Homemade Camera Podcast Facebook group. I go there pretty often. And then there's AVYNICK is my Instagram, AviNick. And that's
Nick at homemadecamera.com also is
yeah,
an
email, right. And avinick@gmail.com is another email that works. I like communicating by writing back and forth a lot of the time. And so that works well for me.
And Ethan, how can people get a hold of you?
You can find me at cameradactyl.com, Ethan at cameradactyl.com, or at cameradactyl on Instagram and YouTube.
All right. You can get a hold of me, Graham at Homemade Camera. I'm also Graham Homemade Camera on Instagram. And once, just one little thing before we go. Thank you, Nicole, for coming on. It's been great, and there lots of exciting things have come out of this, and I can't wait to go find an ice cube tray.
Yeah,
Thanks, Nicole.
So
thanks, Nicole. That was inspiring.
Oh, thank you.
yeah.
I'm really happy that you guys invited me here today because it's just got me flowing even more now. This is crazy.
Cool. And we want to give also a little congratulations to the Sunny 16 podcast. They are just about to have their 200th episode, so we want to say congratulations to them. And this will probably air after their episode. But congratulations on 200 episodes. We also want to say thanks to Robbie Cribbs from Soundtrap Studios. He's the one who has composed our music and allows us to use it for each episode. Thanks, Robbie.
Thanks, Robbie.
Thanks, Robbie.
Thank you.